You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one, one will be provided for you. There was a time not so long ago when those now famous words did not exist. No warning, no script, no reminder that you could stay silent. Just a room, a table, and questions. If you were arrested in early 1960s America,
she don't like nobody on the carpet, especially police. Carefully take out your weapon, holding the butt with 2 fingers only. Slowly place it on the floor and take 3 steps back.
the law technically protected you. The Constitution promised that you did not have to incriminate yourself. It promised you could have a lawyer. But promises written on paper are very different from protection spoken out loud. If you do not know your rights, you do not really have them. That's why this channel exists. I am a Chachi and I'm here to break down your rights in a way that actually makes sense, so you are never left in the dark. Before we go further, thank you. We have just hit 100 subscribers. It may look small, but it means everything to us. If you are new here, kindly subscribe and be part of this growing community. If you would like to support the channel even more, check out our merchandise featuring unique African wear, accessories and art that celebrates culture while backing this mission. Now, back to the story. This is where the story begins. Not in a courtroom, not in a grand legal debate, but in a small interrogation room in Phoenix, Arizona, where a man named Ernesto Miranda sat alone. He wasn't a powerful man. He wasn't educated in the law. He didn't know constitutional theory or legal doctrine. He was just a 23-year-old living in Phoenix, Arizona. A man with a troubled past, run-ins with the law, unstable work, and little formal education. And as he sat there in that room, there was one thing he understood clearly. He was being questioned. In 1963, police brought him in on suspicion of kidnapping and rape. They did not tell him he could remain silent. They did not tell him he could ask for a lawyer. They did not tell him that anything he said could be used against him. For 2 hours, the questions kept coming. And eventually, like many people would in that situation, isolated, pressured, and unsure, Miranda confessed. In his signed statement, he described stopping a young woman, forcing her into his car, restraining her, driving her away, and sexually assaulting her before returning her home. The document also included a formal declaration stating that the confession was made voluntary, of his own free will, without threats or coercion, and with the full awareness that it could be used against him in court. But that raises a deeper question. How can confession be truly voluntary if the person was never told they had the right to remain silent? A clean case, a strong confession, a quick conviction. Justice, it seemed, had been served. But beneath the surface, something was deeply wrong. At the trial, Miranda's confession became the centerpiece of the prosecution's case. It was powerful evidence, hard to argue against your own words. But his defense asked a simple, unsettling question. How can confession be truly voluntary if the person giving it didn't even know they had the right not to speak? That question didn't just challenge a conviction, it challenged the system itself. And soon it reached the highest authority in American law, the Supreme Court of the United States. In 1966, the court agreed to hear the case, Miranda versus Arizona. It wasn't just about one man anymore. It was about what happens behind closed doors, about power, about pressure, about whether silence can truly be a choice if no one tells you it exists. At the center of the court's reasoning was a recognition of something uncomfortable but undeniable. An interrogation room is not a neutral place. It is controlled. It is isolating. It is inherently coercive. Even without physical force, the environment itself can push a person to speak. And if the Constitution is meant to protect individuals from being compelled to incriminate themselves, then those protections must exist where the pressure is strongest, inside that room. Led by Chief Justice Al Warren, the court made a decision that will echo across generations. They ruled that suspects must be clearly informed of their rights before questioning begins. Not hinted at, not assumed, not buried in legal theory. Spoken clearly, directly, every time. From that moment, a new ritual was born. A simple set of words that will become one of the most recognizable statements in the world. You have a right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in the court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one, one will be provided for you. This became known as Miranda Rights, and with them, silence was transformed from suspicion into protection. But this moment didn't appear out of nowhere. It was part of a larger story, a legal awakening that had been building for years. Just 3 years earlier, in Gideon versus Wainwright, a man named Clarence R. Gideon stood alone in court, too poor to afford a lawyer, and argued that justice should not depend on wealth. The court agreed. They ruled that the right to counsel must be provided to those who cannot afford it. That decision planted a seed. Rights must be real, not theoretical. Then came Escobedo versus Illinois, where Danny Escobedo was denied access to his lawyer during police questioning. Again, the court stepped in. Again, they said, this is not acceptable. Piece by piece, the idea took shape. Rights must follow you into the interrogation room, not wait outside. When Miranda arrived at the court, it wasn't the beginning of a conversation. It was the moment everything crystallized, and yet not everyone welcomed it. Critics warned that criminals will walk free, that police will be restricted, that justice will suffer.
And tonight it's time for some honest talk about the problem of order in the United States. Let us always respect, as I do, our courts and those who serve on them, but let us also recognize that some of our courts, in their decisions, have gone too far in weakening the peace forces as against the criminal forces in this country. And if we are to restore order and respect for law in this country, there's one place we're going to begin. We're going to have...
And in some cases, confessions were indeed thrown out. Cases collapsed. But something more important was taking shape. A system that didn't just seek answers, but demanded fairness in how those answers were obtained. Over time, the Miranda rule did not stay still. It was tested, stretched, and slowly reshaped by the kinds of cases that push law to its limits. One of the first cracks came with urgency. In New York versus Quails, police were faced with an immediate threat, a hidden weapon somewhere in public. They asked about it before giving the warning. The court accepted it. In that moment, a new idea was born. The public safety exception. Because sometimes the law bends when danger is seconds away. But the pressure wasn't only on the street. It came from Congress too. In Dickerson versus United States, lawmakers tried to erase Miranda entirely, arguing it was just a rule of procedure, not something deeper. But the court drew a hard line. Miranda was not optional. It wasn't just guidance. It had become part of a constitutional rule, and it will not be undone. Even then, the harder questions were still coming. Questions about the edges of the rule itself. Because Miranda is focused on interrogation, the court was eventually forced to answer something more fundamental. What actually counts as interrogation? In Rhode Island versus Inns, the court said it isn't just direct questioning. It's anything police say or do that they should reasonably know is likely to make a suspect respond. Interrogation stopped being just words. It became influence, pressure, psychology. Then came another question, just as important but less visible in practice. When does custody actually begin? Because Miranda doesn't apply everywhere, the court was forced to define what it actually means to be in custody. In Stansbury versus California, the court made it clear that custody isn't about what the officers secretly intend or later claim they meant. It depends on something more immediate. How a reasonable person in that situation will understand their freedom to live. A subtle shift in wording, but a major shift in reality. Because now the line isn't drawn by the police, it's drawn by perception. And that perception decides when Miranda even turns on. And then the balance shifted again. In Beguis versus Tompkins, the court changed the weight of silence. Staying silent was no longer enough. If you want protection, you have to clearly say it. The responsibility quietly moved toward the suspect. But even when the rule applies, another layer remained underneath it all. In Colorado versus Conley, the court drew a sharper distinction. Miranda is about coercion, not paperwork. A broken warning doesn't mean a broken constitution. What matters is whether the confession was actually forced. And then came another, more unsettling question. I know you are asking yourself, what happens when police don't question you directly, but instead use someone else to get you to talk? Maybe an undercover officer posing as a fellow inmate. Does Miranda apply? In Illinois versus Perkins, the court said no. Because the suspect doesn't know he's speaking to a law enforcement, there is no coercive interrogation in the Miranda sense. No pressure, no warning, authority, just conversation. And without pressure, the confession is admissible. And so the rule keeps moving, not in a straight line, but at the edges, in urgency and silence, in custody and perception, in pressure, awareness, and deception. Miranda was never frozen in place. It was shaped, case by case, until it became something constantly rewritten at its boundaries. But perhaps the most surprising part of this story is how it ends. After his conviction was overturned, Ernesto Miranda was retried, this time without the confession, this time with the rules in place. And yet, he was still found guilty. He still went to prison. The man whose case transformed the justice system did not escape it. Because Miranda was never about one man's innocence or guilt. It was about the process, the principle, the idea that justice must be fair even when the outcome doesn't change. Today, those words live everywhere, in police stations, in courtrooms, in movies, TV shows, and everyday conversation. You have the right to remain silent. They have become so familiar that it's easy to forget they had to be fought for, that they were born out of uncertainty, pressure, and one man's confession in a quiet room. And maybe that's the real lesson of this story. Rights don't mean much if they are invisible. Power needs boundaries. Authority needs accountability. And justice, real justice, requires more than outcomes. It requires awareness, because sometimes the most powerful thing a man can do is say nothing at all.
This court is your court, this court is my court. From the trial court to the appellate court, from the open sessions to the chambers of justice, this court was made for you and me. As I was walking that corridor of justice, I saw above me the banners of fairness. I saw before me the scales of balance. This court was made for you and me. I've roamed and rambled, followed by my footsteps, to the halls of justice and the judges' chambers. And all around me a voice was sounding. This court was made for you and me. When the court is in session and I am walking, and the gavel is echoing, the voice is talking. As the truth unfolds, a voice is chanting. This court was made for you and me.